Hey guys, tonight we travel back. Not just a few decades or centuries, but way back to the dust, drama, and deeply unfiltered chaos of ancient Greece. You land barefoot on the sun-baked stones of Athens, and almost instantly you're overwhelmed. So before you get really comfortable and fall asleep, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And hey, comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time is it where you are. I find it super interesting to see who's joining you from all over the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on the fan for that gentle hum, and let's go on tonight's journey together. Everything smells like crushed thyme and old goatskin. A merchant shouts something that sounds vaguely insulting. A priest walks past trailing smoke. And you're dressed like, well, a confused time-traveling tourist in jeans and a t-shirt. That's strike one. You take a cautious step into the agora and realize there are rules here. Unspoken ones. And you just broke 5 by existing. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments too. I love seeing where you all listen from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up on a thin wool mat. There's no mattress, no pillow, no blackout curtains. Just sunlight stabbing through a crooked clay window and a man shouting something about Zeus's mercy in the street below. Welcome to ancient Greece, where comfort is a myth and privacy is for the gods. You sit up, blinking. Your clothes, gone. In their place, a chiton. Basically a linen bedsheet held together with brooches, and yes, it's definitely more revealing than anything you've ever dared wear in public. Also underwear? Not a thing. The breeze lets you know. As you shuffle outside, sandals slapping against the dry, packed earth, the smell hits you first. It's a tangy blend of sweat, baked olives, goat dung, and incense. There's no plumbing, no sewers in your neighborhood, and waste disposal involves a bucket and someone else's problem. You step into the sun. It's not just hot, it's Olympian hot. The kind of heat that makes the stones themselves radiate judgment. And there's no SPF here, only the faintest hope that olive oil somehow counts as skincare. Spoiler, it doesn't. As you walk through the neighborhood, kids are chasing each other with sticks. Chickens are definitely not where chickens should be. And someone is roasting a fish that may or may not still be twitching. A man walks by and scowls at your sandals. Too soft, he mutters in ancient Greek. Won't last a day. You wonder how he knows you're not from around here. Then remember your awkward walk, your confused eyes, and the way you instinctively reach for your phone every 10 seconds. You pass a small shrine. Just a clay statue of Athena, draped in old cloth, surrounded by burnt figs and the stub of a candle. You nod politely. A woman sees you, gasps, and hisses. You didn't bow. Have you no piety? Strike 2. Now everyone's staring, so you bow. Too deeply. Your brooch pops open, and the chiton nearly turns into a full-body toga fail. Somewhere the gods are laughing. Definitely Dionysus. Your only option is to find somewhere safe, which doesn't exist, but maybe the agora, the central marketplace, will give you some cover. As you stumble in, the crowd thickens. Merchants hawk clay pots, dried herbs, suspect cheeses. Philosophers are mid-rant, waving scrolls like weapons. And in the middle of it all, you, trying not to sneeze from all the dust and wondering why there are so many goats indoors. You try to speak to someone, maybe ask for directions. But the dialect is ancient. The hand gestures are not universal. And the last thing you meant to say sounds disturbingly close to a marriage proposal. A shopkeeper blushes. You back away. A man in a white himation grabs your arm. Are you a citizen? He asks. You freeze. This isn't just small talk. It's life or death. Because if you're not a citizen, you're not entitled to rights. You could be mistaken for a slave, a foreigner, or worse, a tax collector. Historians still argue whether non-citizens in Athens had any true protections, or whether it was all just polite fiction wrapped in democracy's branding. But for now, you do what any time-lost tourist would. Nod and change the subject. You get away, duck behind a stack of amphorae, and breathe. You've been awake for an hour and already committed 3 cultural faux pas, 1 fashion emergency, and possibly entered an accidental engagement. Ancient Greece is not messing around. You make your way to a small fountain. A few others are gathered, scooping water in jars, washing hands. You join them and splash your face. It's not exactly refreshing. The water tastes faintly of metal and moss, and someone beside you casually drops in a fig. For flavor? For ritual? Who knows? Don't drink too much, an older woman mutters. It's sacred today. You nod again. Everything seems sacred or cursed, depending on the time of day and which god is trending. You glance at your reflection. Dusty, red-faced, hair stuck to your forehead. You look like a side character who doesn't survive the first act of a tragedy. Still, you've survived this long. You tie your chiton tighter, square your shoulders, and step back into the chaos. That's when a rooster attacks you. You manage to escape the rooster, barely. It struts off triumphantly, leaving you with a shallow scratch and a bruised ego. You're still reeling from your chiton malfunction, the marriage misunderstanding, and a brush with poultry violence when your stomach growls. Loudly. Ah, yes. You haven't eaten yet. Time for breakfast. Now, before you start dreaming of flaky croissants or fluffy omelets, you should know. Ancient Greek breakfast is, let's say, functional. You wander into a home, maybe the one you magically woke up in, and someone gestures toward a low table. A wooden tray is placed in front of you with all the joy of an offering at a very lazy temple. What's on it? Bread. Not soft bread. This stuff is basically edible sandstone. You pick up a chunk, bite down, and regret everything. It's dry, tough, and was clearly baked sometime last week. You look around for butter. There is none. Jam? Nope. Instead, there's a small bowl of olive paste, a mix of crushed olives, garlic, and the sharp sting of disappointment. You try dipping. It helps, slightly. At least your jaw gets a workout. Next to it, a clay cup. You eagerly sip and gag. It's sour wine. For breakfast. Not the cute brunchy kind with orange juice and fancy stems. This tastes like regret aged in a damp amphora. You want coffee. You need coffee. But there is no coffee. Coffee hasn't been discovered yet. You are living in a time where caffeine is not an option. You take another sip, purely out of despair. The wine sloshes in your stomach like a mistake. You immediately feel like napping again, but the house is coming alive around you. Someone's grinding barley in a stone bowl. A child's playing with a stick in the dirt floor. A goat is trying to get inside. Again. Historians still debate whether the Greeks truly considered this a meal or just a survival tactic until something better arrived at dinner. Either way, the most luxurious part of this breakfast is that someone boiled your barley instead of leaving it raw. You almost feel honored. A woman tosses you a fig. You bite in, sweet, finally. A bright spot in an otherwise aggressively beige menu. But you're still hungry. You notice another dish nearby. Cheese. You reach for it and someone barks. Not before the offering. Right, you forgot. The gods eat first. You watch as someone takes the nicest portion, probably that cheese, and places it carefully on a small stone slab outside. A little puff of incense, a quick prayer, and then you can eat. Maybe. If you're fast enough before the dog gets it. By now your stomach has mostly given up and the sour wine is making decisions for you. You sit outside, blinking in the early light, watching the neighborhood come to life. Men are already headed to the agora. Women are sweeping. A man in a red Himation is shouting about taxes or fish. It's unclear. You ask someone nearby what lunch is. They laugh and say, "Whatever you didn't eat last night." Great. You decide to explore. Maybe there's food out there. Real food. You wander the streets, guided by smell. Some good, some less so. You spot a vendor roasting chickpeas over a clay stove. You try to buy some. He asks for obols. You fumble. You have none. You offer a pebble. He's not amused. Barter time. You check your pockets. Nothing. You tug at your brooch. He shrugs. Already has 10. You offer your sandals. He nods. Deal. You're now barefoot, but you have warm chickpeas. The moment is fleeting, but glorious. Salt, crunch, heat. You almost cry. "Not bad, huh?" a voice says. It's the vendor. He tells you he makes them fresh every morning. You ask how. He explains the mix of herbs, thyme, oregano, coriander, and ashes. Wait, ashes? It gives it smokiness, he says, very proud. You nod, smiling through mild alarm. You're starting to notice how common hunger is here. Most people don't eat 3 meals a day. Some barely eat one. There's no refrigeration. Bread molds quickly. Meat is rare unless it's a festival or a goat had an accident. You also start noticing how people smell. There's no deodorant. Baths are a luxury. People dab themselves with oil, yes, oil, and scrape it off with a curved metal tool called a strigil. It works. In theory. But right now, on a hot day in the market, it's more of a suggestion. You back away from a group of heavily oiled athletes arguing about whose trainer is more divine. One of them sneezes into his hand, wipes it on his tunic, and offers to shake yours. You pretend to sneeze too. Classic deflection. Works like a charm. A philosopher sits nearby on a broken column, eating boiled lentils from a bowl and shouting about the void. You inch closer, hoping for a bite. He offers you a spoonful of air. True sustenance is found in the mind, he says, staring directly into your soul. You thank him and leave. Eventually, you find a small tavern run by an older woman who looks like she's fought 3 wars with just her rolling pin. She sizes you up, then slides a bowl toward you. Inside, onions, barley, herbs, and what might be a piece of snail. It's warm. You eat it gratefully. New here? She asks. You nod. Keep your head down, and don't trust anyone selling imported honey. It's just wax and lies. You thank her and ask if there's anything sweet for dessert. She pauses, then brings out a tiny cup of sesame and honey paste. You take one bite and swear you see the gods. She grins. Don't get used to it. As you leave, she gives you a dried fig wrapped in cloth. A parting gift. You don't realize until later that this is the kindest gesture anyone will make all day. Because the gymnasium awaits. And there will be oil. So much oil, the fig keeps you going. Barely. But that moment of sweetness is quickly overshadowed by the looming reality of your next task. It's time to go to the gymnasium. Now don't get too excited. This isn't your modern air-conditioned temple of treadmills and motivational posters. No neon leggings, no bottled water, no discreet earbuds playing podcasts. The ancient Greek gymnasium is an entirely different beast. You arrive led by vague instructions involving turning left at the statue missing a nose, and right at the olive tree that looks like a goat. And suddenly, there it is. An open courtyard surrounded by columned porticos, buzzing with activity and shouting. A lot of shouting. You step inside, and immediately the heat hits you like a chariot. The sun bakes the pale stone flooring until it's practically glowing, and the air smells of sweat, earth, and oil. So much oil. The gymnasium isn't just for working out. It's also the social hub for any respectable male citizen, and apparently the dress code is absolutely nothing. That's right, everyone is naked. You stop dead. Men of all shapes, sizes, and sandal tans are jogging, wrestling, throwing discus, and chatting about politics, all completely nude. You instinctively try to backpedal, but someone claps you on the shoulder, oily hand and all. "You're new," he says with a grin. "Strip and stretch." You manage a weak smile. Your chiton is already dangerously flimsy, and now it's coming off. You place it carefully on a bench and try not to think about hygiene. The bench, you suspect, hasn't been cleaned since the Peloponnesian War. You stand awkwardly, exposed to both the elements and the judgment of 100-toned strangers. A young man nearby begins rubbing himself with olive oil, meticulously coating every inch before grabbing a strigil. A metal scraper curved like a question mark, and scraping it off again. "Exfoliation," he says, winking. "Very important." You try to do the same, but the oil is slippery, the scraper is dull, and somehow you manage to drop it into the sand 3 times before even touching your arm. You now resemble a greased amphora. Training begins with calisthenics, jumping, squatting, bending, and not a single stitch of clothing in sight. You try to focus, but it's difficult when your brain is screaming. This is a nightmare, and you're dodging flying droplets of sweat and olive oil at every turn. Next up, wrestling. You're paired with a man named Crateros. He is built like a statue and has a beard that could frighten a bear. You extend a tentative handshake. He body slams you. The sand cushions the fall slightly, but the humiliation cuts deep. You try to fight back, but Crateros simply chuckles and pins you again, this time with your face mushed firmly into his armpit. "Good effort," he says. You're not sure if it's sarcasm or praise, but either way, you've inhaled enough sweat to qualify as part of his workout. You learn fast. This isn't just sport. This is training for war. The gymnasium is where young men prepare for the battlefield. Endurance, strength, coordination, it's all part of the citizen package. If you're male and of age, this is your rite of passage. Historians still argue whether the nudity was purely about mobility or had deeper cultural symbolism, tied to ideals of beauty and strength. All you know is that you miss clothes. A lot. After the match, you're handed a small clay jar. Inside, more oil. Now time to re-lubricate and scrape again. You give up on technique and just start smearing it everywhere like an anxious raccoon. Then someone calls for javelin practice. You're handed a long spear with a leather loop. You nod like you know what to do. You absolutely don't. You wind up, hurl it skyward, and immediately hit a statue of Hermes square in the nose. Everyone turns. A long silence. "Well," Crateros mutters, "he won't be guiding your soul to the afterlife." You're quietly reassigned to discus instead, where you at least manage not to injure any divine representations. Your throw is pitiful, but it doesn't bounce back, which counts as a win. A bearded man lectures from a bench nearby, shouting about balance between mind and body, citing Plato while doing toe touches. You can't help but notice he hasn't moved in 20 minutes. Classic gym philosopher. One man is doing push-ups while reciting the Iliad. Another is leaping over a row of amphorae with frankly terrifying elegance. You sit, winded, covered in oil, and wondering how anyone survives this on a daily basis. An older trainer walks by. "You look like a deflated wineskin," he says gently. "Hydrate?" Finally, water. You are led to a large stone basin filled with what you pray is drinkable water. You dunk your head in, gulp, and feel slightly reborn. The final part of training? Bath time. You're ushered into a bathhouse, a domed chamber filled with steam, echoing voices, and more nudity. There's a large communal pool, a smaller hot pool, and a cold one that might actually be a punishment from Poseidon. You slip into the warm water. Your muscles thank you. Your skin, however, is still trying to absorb the 6th layer of olive oil. You float, dazed, as men argue about tactics from the last war and whether Achilles was real or just an early influencer. You catch a fringe detail. One man says he uses crocodile dung as a face mask. Another nod says it keeps the skin youthful. You file this under things I hope were jokes. As you sit soaking, someone brings up the latest political decree. A city nearby has banned public spitting. The gym echoes with laughter. Then someone sneezes into the pool. The laughter stops. Eventually, everyone begins climbing out. You follow reluctantly. Your chiton is now sand-speckled, crumpled, and somehow even more revealing than before. As you leave the gymnasium, your legs tremble. Your dignity limps behind you, and your entire body smells like olives and crushed dreams. You have survived the ancient Greek fitness regimen. Barely. And now, nature calls. But toilets, my friend, are not what you think. Nature has been calling for a while now, and unfortunately, ancient Greece has no voicemail. You shuffle through dusty streets, sore from wrestling, still slightly oily and starting to panic. You glance around, looking for something that resembles a public bathroom. A sign, a symbol, even a bush that looks socially acceptable. But no, this isn't Rome. Greece is a little more rustic when it comes to waste management. Eventually you find a communal latrine. It's a long, low stone bench with holes carved in it. Some for sitting, others suspiciously shaped like keyholes for, well, squatting. There's no privacy. No partitions. Just a row of stone slabs, lined up like ancient Greek musical chairs with other folks doing their business 2 feet away. You hesitate. A man grunts from the end of the row and waves you over. Plenty of space, he says. You're not comforted. You sit. The stone is cold, very cold. You try not to make eye contact with anyone, but it's difficult when the man beside you strikes up a conversation about the grain tax, while enthusiastically relieving himself. And just when you think it can't get worse, it's time to clean up. There is no toilet paper. What you get instead is a stick. On the end of that stick, a sponge. A communal sponge. Sitting in a bucket of vinegar water. Reused. Frequently. Without bleach. You stare at it like it's a cursed artifact. Which, to be fair, it sort of is. Historians still debate whether the Greeks really shared one sponge or if each person had their own. You decide to believe in the more hygienic version, for your sanity. You hold your breath, do what must be done, and make a mental note to never take modern plumbing for granted again. As you exit, you spot a young boy emptying a chamber pot into the gutter running down the street. He throws it casually. It splashes onto the cobbles and runs off toward the agora. You jump back just in time. This, you learn, is how waste disposal works here. Gravity, luck, and a prayer to Poseidon. You walk on, nose wrinkled, careful to step only on dry stones. You're not entirely sure what's water and what's not water. You spot another toilet, a wooden platform above a small stream. It's less crowded, but also less stable. You choose not to test its engineering. You've made enough embarrassing public appearances today. As you wander, you notice something else. Women aren't using the same facilities. In fact, you rarely see women outside at all unless they're fetching water or heading to religious festivals. Their latrines are in separate, more private areas, usually tucked behind homes or in corner alleys, and even then they're not exactly better, just less public. At this point, you're dreaming of flush buttons and scented soap. Soap, by the way, doesn't exist here, not really. People clean themselves with sand, oil, and scraping tools, sometimes with ashes, sometimes with clay. You spot a woman washing laundry with fuller's earth and beating it against a stone. The water turns cloudy. She wrings it out and hangs it on a rope to dry. You wonder if it's technically cleaner or just wetter. You pass a bathhouse again. Men only, of course. It smells slightly better than the latrines, but still has that distinct ancient funk. A mix of mildew, old oil, and ambition. You try to freshen up at a public fountain. The water's cold and clear, flowing from a spout shaped like a lion's head. You splash your hands, rinse your face, and pretend it's a skincare routine. It's not. But it's better than the sponge. Someone nearby is brushing their teeth with crushed oyster shell and a stick. They grin at you. Their teeth are very white, also very chipped. You sit on the edge of the fountain and take a breath. The sun is high now, baking everything into a crisp mosaic of noise and heat. You're sweating again, which means you're slowly re-oiling yourself like a rotisserie chicken. A fly lands on your knee. You flick it away. It returns. Another man sits beside you and casually picks at his ear with what looks like a bronze hairpin. "Hot day," he says. You nod. He offers you a fig. You politely decline. He shrugs, eats it, and flicks the pit into the street, where a dog immediately sniffs it and walks off unimpressed. You ask him where the cleanest latrine is. He laughs and says, "Clean? That's for the rich. Or the Romans." Which reminds you, Athens is still figuring out urban sanitation. Rome, years later, will build sophisticated sewer systems and aqueducts. But here, everything's slightly less engineered and slightly more freestyle. And yet somehow it all works. Sort of. The city hums. People go about their day. Chickens roam. Children play in the dust. Philosophers argue about whether virtue can exist in a dirty world. And everyone, absolutely everyone, just accepts that the sponge on a stick is part of life. You're not sure if you've become tougher or just numb. Your stomach gurgles again. Maybe it's the chickpeas. Maybe it's the sour wine. Maybe it's the emotional trauma of ancient hygiene. Either way, you decide to take a walk and give your digestive system some space. You pass a man selling incense, another selling what he claims is Egyptian perfume. It smells like boiled myrrh and regret. You move on. Soon you're back near the agora. The scent of grilled fish wafts in the air. You're tempted, but cautious. One wrong bite and you're back at the sponge bucket. You duck into a shaded alley, find a quiet spot on a stone ledge, and close your eyes. A dog lies nearby, panting. Somewhere in the distance, a street performer is singing a tune about Aphrodite's terrible cooking. You open your eyes to find a cat staring at you, judging you. Ancient Greece is full of gods, myths, and drama, but also grit, grime, and gastrointestinal gambles. Still, you made it through the bathroom experience, which means you're officially part of the city now. But don't get too comfy, because it's time to shout your opinions in public and possibly get exiled. Welcome to politics. You're still recovering from the whole sponge incident, but ancient Greece doesn't care about your trauma, because now it's time to participate in one of the cornerstones of Athenian life, democracy. And by participate, we mean shout your opinions at strangers in a hot, crowded theater of chaos, while hoping no one votes to banish you for 10 years. Welcome to the Neeks, the great rocky hill where the Athenian assembly meets. You hike up the slope, dodging olive vendors and stray dogs until you reach a flat expanse overlooking the city. It's not fancy, just a big open space carved with seats and steps, surrounded by dust, loud men, and an overwhelming sense that someone's definitely going to get publicly humiliated before lunch. The crowd's already gathering. About 6,000 men are required to hold a valid assembly. No women, of course, no slaves, no foreigners. Just citizens. And even that comes with strings attached. Your father had to be Athenian, your mother too. And you had to be at least 18, but also have completed military training. There's a whole checklist. You sit on a stone bench, legs still wobbly from wrestling, and try to blend in. Someone hands you a token, a small bronze disc. That's your entrance pass. No ticket, no vote. Another man nearby holds up his token and shouts, "Let's ban fishmongers from speaking today." Laughter erupts. Apparently, that's a running joke. You hear your name, or at least you think it's your name. Turns out someone scrawled something that sounds like it on a potsherd, an old Piece of broken pottery. That's how ostracism works here. If enough people think you're annoying, dangerous, or just too popular, they vote to exile you for 10 years. No trial, no appeal. Just boom, exile. It's like cancel culture, but with sandals and significantly more sunburn. Historians still argue whether ostracism was truly democratic justice or just political theater. Either way, it's terrifying. You pretend not to hear the name. Probably just your imagination. Hopefully. At the front of the Knicks, a man stands on a stone platform, the Bama, and starts yelling. He's a known rhetor, a public speaker. Think. Ancient Greek TED Talk, but with more shouting and fewer slides. He's talking about ships. The city needs more triremes, he says. Persia's restless. Taxes must rise. The crowd boos. A second speaker gets up. He disagrees. He wants to spend the money on new roads and restoring temples. People cheer. Then someone throws a date pin at his head. Civil discourse. The debate intensifies. Every speaker tries to one-up the last. The wind whips their hymnations dramatically. At one point, a man invokes Athena's divine blessing. Another accuses his rival of being too friendly with Spartans. Gasps. You think someone faints? But it might just be heat stroke. Suddenly, the crowd looks toward you. A man gestures. Your turn. You panic. What could you possibly say? You don't speak fluent ancient Greek. You barely survived the sponge. And now they want you to give a speech? You stand. The wind flaps your chiton ominously. You clear your throat and say the only phrase you remember from earlier. I like chickpeas. There is silence. Then, inexplicably, someone claps. Then another. Then a cheer. Chickpeas for all! Someone shouts. You nod solemnly and sit down. It's official. You just influenced Athenian policy. Maybe, possibly. More speakers come and go, some eloquent, others unhinged. One man blames everything on the lack of sacrifices to Apollo. Another accuses a neighbor of hoarding wine. The assembly descends into chaos, but eventually votes are cast. Pebbles dropped into jars, a count tallied, a decision made. That's democracy. Messy, loud, terrifying, but oddly effective. You wander away from the Knicks, stunned. You helped vote on naval policy and almost got exiled in the same hour. That's what passes for a normal Tuesday. You pass a group of men gossiping near a pottery stand. They're talking about last week's trial. A man accused of stealing olives from sacred trees. Serious offense. Olive trees are protected by law. The accused denied it, of course, but someone saw him with green stains on his fingers. Cut off his hand? One man suggests. Nah, says another. Just exile. They nod as if choosing between lunch options. This, you realize, is the other half of Athenian politics, the court system. It's massive, intricate, and just as terrifying. Citizens are randomly chosen as jurors, sometimes hundreds at a time. Trials are quick, theatrical, and almost never involve lawyers. Just speeches. Lots and lots of dramatic speeches. You hear someone mutter, like, they should have poured vinegar on his sandals. That's what my uncle did to liars. You're not sure if it's a legal precedent or just petty vengeance. You stop at a stall selling clay shards. The vendor hands you one, half joking. Write a name, cast your vote. You think about it. Maybe Crateros, the man who suplexed you at the gym. Or that rooster from earlier. Tempting. Instead, you write rooster in crooked Greek letters and tuck it into your belt. As you walk through the city, the impact of the political system starts to settle in. This society, complex, passionate, brutally public, is run by people yelling on hillsides, voting with pebbles, and trusting strangers to deliver justice. It's exhilarating and exhausting. And yes, you still might get randomly ostracized, but at least you had a say in your doom. By the time you reach the Agora again, the sun's begun to dip. But it's not time to rest yet. The market is alive, swarming with people, noise, smells, and more ways to embarrass yourself than you thought possible. Time to shop, argue, haggle, and maybe get scammed. Let's go to market. The sun hangs heavy over the agora, and the whole place pulses like a hot, dusty heartbeat. Welcome to the true center of ancient Athenian life. Equal parts marketplace, gossip hub, political soundboard, and philosophical battleground. If the gymnasium was where bodies were built, the agora is where reputations are made, and occasionally destroyed over the price of onions. You arrive just as the crowd peaks. It's a sensory ambush. The air is thick with roasted fish, incense, donkey droppings, and human ambition. Somewhere a flute whines off-key. Somewhere else, someone's loudly arguing with a cabbage vendor about whether said cabbage is blessed by Demeter. You're instantly overwhelmed. There are stalls crammed together like rush hour wagons, overflowing with clay pots, pickled garlic, dyed fabrics, bronze jewelry, carved figurines, and inexplicably, a man trying to sell lightly used sandals. They're still wet. Your nose leads you first to a fishmonger's stand. It's intense. Flat, glassy eyes stare up at you from piles of anchovies and slabs of salted eel. The vendor grins. You like fish, stranger? Half price for you. You smell like democracy. You're not sure if that's a compliment or just a fact. You ask what kind of fish it is. He leans in close. Delicious kind. Suspicious. You try haggling because that's what everyone around you is doing. Coins clink. Voices rise. A man shouts, "This isn't Sparta!" As if that's the ultimate insult. Another throws a handful of olives in protest. You glance at a nearby vendor selling amulets. Tiny bronze charms in the shapes of gods, animals, and various body parts. Protection from curses, she whispers. And heartbreak. You consider buying one for your digestive tract, just in case. Historians still debate how much of the agora's activity was strictly economic versus social. It seems like half the people here aren't buying anything. They're just arguing, eavesdropping, or trying to impress a nearby philosopher. And speaking of philosophers... Oh no, you've wandered into the sophist trap. A man in a worn hymation blocks your path. His beard is large, his scroll is larger. He looks like he hasn't blinked in 4 hours. Tell me, stranger, he booms, can justice exist without the concept of a shared soul? You freeze. He takes that as engagement. You try to answer with a hesitant, maybe? And suddenly it's a full-blown debate. You're surrounded. A crowd gathers. Someone hands you a fig for strength. The sophist gestures wildly. He quotes Plato, waves at a chicken, and says it proves the soul is eternal. You, meanwhile, mention you like figs and think kindness is nice. A small group applauds. He glares at you, declares the debate a draw, and vanishes into the crowd with an oddly dramatic spin. You've just survived your first agora ambush. Congratulations. You slink away to a quiet pottery stall. Rows of amphorae, kylixes, and little figurines line the shelves. The potter, a quiet man with clay-streaked arms, doesn't try to debate you. Instead, he offers you a small cup of chilled water with mint leaves. Mercy. You ask about his work. He explains the firing process, how they use a 3-stage kiln technique, and how red figure pottery is the new trend. You nod, trying not to drop the delicate vase shaped like a nymph. Then a loud crash. Someone's knocked over a stack of jars. The crowd laughs. The vendor screams. A dog runs by with a string of sausages in its mouth. Absolute chaos. You dodge around a group shouting about a stolen chicken, and suddenly you're in the middle of a pop-up courtroom. That's right. Some trials happen right here in the open. A man stands accused of watering down wine. He protests. The crowd jeers. Someone demands he drink 3 cups of his own product as punishment. He does. He vomits. Justice is swift. Nearby, a boy sells gossip like it's fruit. Heard Alcibiades insulted Athena again, he whispers. Swore she tripped him on purpose. You toss him a coin. Worth it. Next to him, a playwright reads aloud from his new comedy. It features a donkey who becomes a politician and taxes all the figs. A man beside you mutters, "Too realistic." You pass a stall with strange imports. Dried dates from Phoenicia, cinnamon from Arabia, and what looks suspiciously like a petrified lizard labeled healing charm. You move on quickly. A woman offers you honey cakes shaped like owls. You buy one. It's dry but sweet, and crumbs fall into your sandal. Worth it. Suddenly, someone tries to sell you citizenship. "I can get you papers," he hisses. "Your own demotic. Cheap." You politely decline before ending up in a philosophical jail. As you wander back toward the edge of the agora, you spot a man giving what seems to be a public reading. He stands on a box, arms wide, quoting lines from Homer with such passion you'd think he was there. The crowd loves it. A kid tosses him a coin. You realize entertainment here is raw, loud, and deeply personal. You sit on a step, exhausted. Your arms are full of random objects: a honey owl, a tiny bronze Apollo, 2 figs, and a scroll you didn't ask for. A woman nearby hands you a cup of diluted wine. You sip. It's not terrible. The agora winds down with the sun. Stalls close. People drift home. Philosophers continue debating shadows and truth, even as vendors pack up their olives and amphorae. You've survived a day of buying, arguing, almost philosophizing, and narrowly avoiding political exile. Again. And now, just as you think you might finally rest, your stomach flips. Too many figs, bad fish, or maybe it's time to visit a doctor. Good luck with that. You knew this moment would come. That first sour gurgle in your stomach. The second one, more insistent. A bead of sweat rolls down your temple. Not from the heat this time, but from fear. Ancient Greek medicine, after all, is not known for its subtlety. You need a doctor, or whatever passes for one in 5th century BCE Athens. You're directed down a side alley to a humble house with a crooked wooden sign showing a snake curled around a staff. That's promising, right? Classic medical symbolism. Universal even. You knock. No answer. You knock again. A door creaks open and you're greeted by a man who looks like he's been awake since the Trojan War. "Ah, a patient," he mutters, peering into your soul. You're pale, weak aura, possibly afflicted by imbalance. Or the moon. You nod. That sounds correct? You explain your symptoms. Stomach issues, mild dizziness, a deep and existential regret for eating street fish. He nods sagely, then reaches into a dusty cabinet and pulls out a jar labeled goat bile and crushed mint. Fantastic. He starts explaining the concept of the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. According to this theory, your health is a soup, and one of the ingredients is misbehaving. Clearly too much black bile, he says, shaking his head. He offers you a remedy: honeyed wine, a boiled leek poultice, and leeches. He's very proud of the leeches. You try to look enthusiastic. You fail. Or, he adds, "We can bleed you." He gestures to a shallow bowl and a knife that definitely doubled as a cheese cutter last night. You opt for the honeyed wine and pray it does more good than harm. As he prepares the concoction, he begins casually diagnosing other people nearby. A man with a limp gets bark scraped on his leg. A child with a cough is given burned snail shells in water. A woman complaining of fatigue is told to walk barefoot on cold stones while singing to Apollo. Historians still argue whether ancient Greek medicine helped more than it harmed, or if most people simply got better despite the treatments. But to be fair, some approaches weren't completely unreasonable. Your doctor, for instance, insists on a good diet, clean air, and regular exercise. The body is like a garden, he says. Too dry, it withers. Too wet, it rots. He pokes your stomach with a stick. Yours is soggy. You sip the honeyed wine. It tastes surprisingly okay. Then he brings out a jar filled with something green and squishy. Cucumber compress, he announces, for the head. You didn't ask for that, but suddenly your forehead is slimy and cool. Not terrible, honestly. Lie down, he says. You do. On a straw mat that smells faintly of feet and thyme. The doctor chants softly in Greek, then sprinkles something that might be ash or maybe flour over your legs. You close your eyes, wondering how this is your life now. Suddenly he claps loudly. Done! You sit up, dizzy but not worse. The stomach pangs have dulled. Maybe it's the wine. Maybe it's the cucumber. Maybe your body just gave up and decided to recover out of sheer self-defense. You thank him. He waves you off. Bring me a fig next time. You leave the clinic, slightly damp, slightly tipsy, and feeling oddly accomplished. But as you walk through the streets, you realize medicine here isn't limited to doctors. Healing rituals are everywhere. A woman waves incense over a sick child. Another ties a red string around her wrist to confuse the bad spirits. At a temple, people leave offerings for Asclepius, the god of healing. Votive tablets shaped like arms, legs, eyes. One even shaped like an ear. You stop at the Asclepian, a sanctuary turned hospital of sorts. Pilgrims come here to sleep in sacred halls, hoping the god will visit them in dreams and deliver divine instructions. It's part hospital, part spa, part dream therapy retreat. A priest hands you a leaf soaked in wine and says, "Sleep on the east side if you want answers." You don't question it. Nearby, a healer demonstrates cupping therapy, placing heated clay cups on a man's back to draw out bad blood. It looks painful, and kind of like a barbecue gone wrong. In the marketplace, you see a man selling potions. Cure for curses, cure for melancholy, cure for ugly, he shouts. You ask what's in them. Mostly figs, he admits. You continue on and spot something deeply unsettling. A small shrine to a plague god. Offerings of garlic, onions, and burned feathers. Athens, after all, has seen its fair share of disease. The plague of Athens, still decades away in your timeline, will ravage the city during the Peloponnesian War. You shiver. Not from fear, but from someone dumping a bucket of cold water off a rooftop. Apparently it's pest repellent day. Cool. As the afternoon drags on, you sit beneath a fig tree and think about everything you've endured so far. Naked wrestling, the sponge of doom, political theater, fishy economics, and now this oily, spicy, cucumber-slathered journey through ancient healing. You're not dead. In ancient Greece, that's already a win. But now, just as you're beginning to relax, a boy runs up shouting something urgent. The schoolmaster wants you. School? Now? You've just survived leeches and goat bile. Surely memorizing the Iliad can't be worse. Right? You follow the boy through winding alleys, still sticky with medicinal oils and harboring a faint scent of boiled leeks. He's grinning, you're not. Eventually he leads you to a small, sun-baked courtyard, shaded by an olive tree. This is school, apparently. There's no building, no desks, and definitely no water cooler. Just a few wooden benches, some dusty scrolls, and a stern-looking man in a faded tunic who may or may not be carved from stone. He's the grammatiste, your teacher. Sit, he says without looking up. You sit. Immediately the lesson begins. No roll call, no icebreakers. Just a barked command. Recite the first lines of the Iliad. You panic. You mutter something that might resemble "Sing, goddess of the wrath of Achilles." But it comes out more like "Sing," like of the sandals of confusion. The class snickers. A boy beside you leans over and whispers, "Don't worry, yesterday someone said Achilles was a fish." You feel better. Slightly. Education here is serious business, and by serious we mean painfully repetitive. Everything is memorized, out loud, over and over. Students chant lines of Homer verse by verse in a nasal rhythm that makes Gregorian monks sound like party DJs. The teacher walks between rows, cane in hand, not for support, but motivation. You quickly learn the 3 pillars of Greek schooling: reading, writing, and reciting. Arithmetic too, if you're lucky, but mostly it's poetry, morals, and grammar. Lots of grammar. All in a language with more verb forms than you've ever seen in your life. A boy in front of you copies a sentence onto a wax tablet using a stylus. You try to do the same and immediately snap your stylus. The wax smudges, you drop the tablet. The teacher sighs. Historians still argue whether ancient Greek education was meant to nurture freethinkers or simply create ideal citizens who wouldn't question authority too much. You suspect the latter. You're handed a new tablet and assigned to write a moral maxim. You go with "don't eat fish from suspicious men." The teacher raises an eyebrow. Next, it's time for music class, which is less relaxing than it sounds. Everyone pulls out lyres or pipes. You get a worn-out cathara with 1 broken string. The teacher claps a rhythm. Everyone plays. Badly. Somewhere a donkey brays in tune. It's beautiful in its own terrifying way. The teacher launches into a lecture on harmony and ethics, how music shapes the soul, how dissonance breeds chaos. You're too distracted trying to tune your instrument to care. Eventually you give up and just pretend to strum. No one notices. Then it's philosophy hour. A boy stands and reads aloud. What is justice? The class groans. You groan louder. A long debate follows. One student argues justice is balance. Another says it's power. A third claims it's the will of the gods. A fourth says justice is not having to go to school. He gets a swat on the head. The teacher points to you. And you? You pause, then say, justice is not getting hit with a cane for being bad at poetry. The teacher blinks. Fair, he says. There's a moment of respect. You bask in it. That is, until it's time for physical education again. You sigh deeply. This time, it's ball games. You're handed a foninda, a pigskin stuffed ball used for what can only be described as medieval dodgeball with yelling. The rules are unclear. Someone tackles you. Someone else sings a war chant. You're definitely not winning. After that, it's back to reading. This time, Aesop's fables. You actually enjoy them. Short stories with animals doing dumb things and learning life lessons. Finally, content you can relate to. The fox and the grapes. Classic bitterness. The tortoise and the hare. Time management. The rooster who finds a jewel and ignores it. Honestly, a mood. The day drags on. There's no recess, no lunch break. You're handed a handful of raisins and a sip of watered wine. That's it. The afternoon sun melts across the courtyard. A fly buzzes lazily. Your head droops. The teacher drones on about how to conjugate middle passive verbs. You start to hallucinate that your wax tablet is whispering Homeric insults at you. A student beside you gets whacked for yawning. Another for looking too smug. It's a minefield of mild suffering. But there are bright spots. You see moments of brilliance in your classmates. One boy can recite 200 lines of Homer without blinking. Another draws perfect geometric shapes in the sand, using nothing but a stick and sheer determination. A third performs a full monologue about courage while balancing a book on his head. These kids are intense. You begin to understand the method behind the madness. It's not just about discipline. It's about building identity, Greek identity. Through poetry, debate, music, and storytelling, they're shaping what it means to be Athenian, to think clearly, speak persuasively, perform virtue. Still, you miss YouTube tutorials. As the lesson ends, the teacher gives you a parting assignment. Memorize a hymn to Apollo and write your own fable. And no more vegetable metaphors, he adds. You nod solemnly. The sun sets. You rise from the dusty bench, back aching, stomach growling, brain thoroughly mashed. And then the teacher smiles for the first time. You didn't pass out, he says. You'll make it. You're not sure if that's a compliment or a diagnosis. You leave the schoolyard under a sky blushing with twilight. The streets hum with post-lesson chatter. A boy recites his fable about a goat who wished to be a god and ended up becoming soup. You breathe in the evening air, cool, rich with the scent of thyme, grilled meat, and impending theater drama. Because guess what? It's showtime. And the plays are even weirder than the medicine. Night has fallen, and the entire city buzzes with a new kind of energy. Less political, less academic, more chaotic. You follow the flow of bodies up a hillside path toward the Theater of Dionysus, carved into the rocky slope of the Acropolis. Thousands are gathering. The moon hangs low and bloated. The air is full of anticipation, spiced wine, and the distant sound of someone practicing a donkey impression far too seriously. It's festival season, and tonight, you're in for a full-blown tragedy. The kind that starts with a funeral and ends with half of the cast dramatically dead, crying about fate and sandals. The theater itself is massive. Carved stone seats form a steep semicircle, all facing a wide circular stage, the orchestra. The actors will perform here, surrounded by a chorus of masked men who sing, chant, and occasionally scream in unison like a very intense a cappella group. You settle into a seat, still aching from school and mildly traumatized by goat bile remedies. Around you, citizens shout for their favorite playwrights. Vendors squeeze through the crowd selling roasted chestnuts and vinegar-drenched fish snacks. You decline. Your stomach is still in recovery mode. As the play begins, a man steps onto the stage wearing a giant mask, painted to show exaggerated emotion, with a gaping mouth like he's permanently surprised. His voice booms, artificially projected with the help of the mask's acoustics. The story, classic Greek fare. A hero with a dark secret, a prophecy, a meddling god, a murder, probably incest, definitely hubris. This is Euripides, or at least someone performing one of his works. The man beside you whispers, "This is the one where the woman poisons her husband and sets fire to the family goat." You nod like that's completely normal. The chorus enters. They move as one, swaying in rhythm, chanting the emotional subtext of the scene like a living Greek Yelp review. Sometimes helpful, sometimes confusing, always dramatic. Suddenly a messenger runs on stage. Bad news, always bad news. Someone has died, or disappeared, or accidentally married their own cousin. The crowd gasps. One woman near you dabs her eyes with a piece of wool. You try to keep up, but the plot twists like a spilled amphora. By the third act, everyone's weeping, someone's been stabbed off stage. Greek tradition, violence happens out of sight. And a god shows up via a crane mechanism, literally lowered onto the stage to resolve everything. The famous Deus ex machina, still used today when a writer gets stuck. Historians still argue whether audiences found this ending satisfying or lazy. But here people cheer. They love the divine drop-in. Intermission. You stretch your legs and look around. A few people reenact their favorite scenes badly. A kid sells fake theatrical masks. You're tempted to buy one labeled confused foreigner. Feels appropriate. You overhear a group debating the morals of the play. One man argues that fate is cruel. Another says the gods are just. A third says all problems begin when women start thinking. The woman beside him dumps her wine on his sandal. You make a mental note. Never argue against strong women in a crowd full of wine and emotion. As the second half begins, it shifts from tragedy to philosophy. A character stares at the stars, monologues about fate, and curses the gods. The chorus hums behind him like an ancient Greek boy band murmuring, every few seconds. Suddenly, a funeral. Again. The dead are honored with song. The light actor spins dramatically and collapses. The chorus wails. A flute screeches. And... curtain. Or what passes for a curtain? Probably just a man with a very large cloak stepping in front of the stage. The audience erupts. Not clapping, but stomping. That's how approval works here. The stone trembles beneath your feet. A boy near you stomps so hard he loses a sandal. No one cares. The theater is alive. You leave in a daze, unsure whether you were entertained or emotionally exercised. Probably both. Outside, Athens glows under torchlight. Street musicians play lyres. Strangers reenact scenes for tips. One man shouts a line from the play and gets 5 coins and a fig. The theater of Dionysus is more than just entertainment. It's education, politics, moral compass, and social therapy all rolled into one dramatic performance. A kind of emotional purification the Greeks called catharsis. And wow, did you just get catharted. You wander down the hill repeating a line you actually understood. Time, the endless devourer of men. Yeah, same. You pass temples lit by flickering lamps. Offerings lie on the steps. Bread, honey, the occasional tiny figurine of a crying goat. A man near you mutters, "Tragedy reminds us what not to do." His friend replies, "Then why do we keep doing it?" They both shrug and sip their wine. Fair point. You finally reach your sleeping mat, brain swimming in poetry and dramatic deaths. You close your eyes just for a second. But guess what? You've forgotten a god's name today, and that's going to cost you. Because religion in ancient Greece isn't just belief, it's a contract. You wake up to shouting, again. Only this time, it's not merchants or philosophers, it's a priest in a long white robe, shaking a thyrsus, basically a fancy stick with ivy and possibly a pine cone on top. Screaming, "Who among you has failed the gods today?" Spoiler, it's you. You sit up, rubbing your face with gritty fingers, and try to remember. Did you skip a ritual? Forget an offering? Offend a statue with your cursed modern posture? Whatever it is, it's probably something, because ancient Greek religion is less about faith and more about keeping up appearances. The gods you see are everywhere, and they're watching. You don't worship them because you feel a connection. You worship them because if you don't, your crops fail, your roof collapses, and your cousin gets turned into a lizard. Or worse, a cautionary tale. You try to look innocent, but it's already too late. A woman points at you. "He didn't bow to the altar at the agora yesterday." She's right, you didn't. You were distracted by that cursed chicken. Now you're being invited to participate in a ritual purification. Yay. You're brought to a small open-air temple. Stone columns, sacred fire, a statue of Apollo glaring at you like he knows you microwaved fish that one time. The priest hands you a branch of laurel dipped in water and gestures to sprinkle it on yourself. You do. It smells like crushed bay leaves and judgment. He then smears your forehead with white clay and recites something about unclean spirits, improper piety, and not making eye contact with sacred goats. This is your life now. You offer a small token, literally a handful of barley grains, and pray it's enough. Then, as if by magic or bureaucracy, you're declared ritually clean. Kind of, for now. Religion in ancient Greece isn't centralized. There's no priesthood telling everyone what to do. Instead, it's a complex, chaotic buffet of household shrines, city cults, festivals, omens, and an endless, exhausting desire to not anger divine beings with serious control issues. Your home, if you had one, would have a tiny shrine called a herm, a square pillar with the head of Hermes and other protrusions. People rub it for good luck. You've seen someone whisper into one while sneaking a grape. Every household has its own rituals. You light a lamp at dawn, you pour a libation before dinner, you burn incense if someone sneezes wrong. Even knocking over a cup could require an apology to Hestia, goddess of hearth, and keeping your act together. Today, though, is a big deal religious day. A festival for Demeter, goddess of grain, motherhood, and very passive-aggressive vengeance. You join a procession. Dozens of people in flowing robes carrying torches and baskets of grain, chanting hymns in unison. Someone hands you a crown of myrtle. You try to look spiritual. As the crowd winds through the city, people stop at various shrines, pouring wine, tossing garlands, and whispering prayers into the marble ears of gods. You can't keep track of who's who. Is that Artemis or Aphrodite? Does Athena like honey? Does Dionysus require dancing, or just encourage it? Historians still argue whether the Greeks believed literally in their gods or treated them more as civic rituals. But here now, under this blazing sun with music and dust and drama all around, it doesn't matter. The emotion is real. At the temple, you watch a sacrifice. Not the bloody kind, thank the gods, but a symbolic offering of bread, cheese, and a drop of wine. The priestess chants a hymn. The crowd responds like a choir of exhausted school kids on a field trip. Then comes the divination. A priest examines the smoke from the fire. Another watches the flight of birds. One woman swirls oil in a dish and gasps. "A bad omen!" she cries. Someone among us lacks proper piety. You quietly shuffle backward. As punishment for the mysterious spiritual imbalance, the crowd must now perform an extra ritual. Everyone lines up to touch a sacred piglet. You do it. The piglet squeals. You whisper, "Sorry, buddy." Later, you learn that this is nothing compared to the Eleusinian mysteries, an elite religious ceremony so secret that no one, not even modern scholars, really knows what happened. Some say hallucinogens. Some say symbolic death. Some say interpretive dance. You hope it was all three. Back in town, you spot a man selling amulets. Little pendants shaped like eyes, snakes, or tiny hands. Worn to ward off the evil eye, which, by the way, is a big deal. If someone stares at you with jealousy or bad vibes, that's it. You're cursed. Your teeth fall out. Your goat stops producing milk. Your sandal strap breaks. You buy 2 amulets, just in case. The day winds on with more prayers, more fire, more chanting. You begin to notice how everything is sacred here. Trees have nymphs, rivers have gods. A strong breeze could be Zeus passing by, or someone sneezing with attitude. You eat dinner, a modest meal of lentils and stale bread, and pour a splash of wine onto the ground as a libation, just to cover your bases. Then you hear it, a flute in the distance, a rhythmic drum, laughter. You follow the sound and stumble upon a Dionysian ritual in full swing. People are dancing, wearing masks, flailing their arms, and singing wild praise to the god of wine, theater, chaos, and general fabulousness. A woman in ivy garlands pulls you into the circle. You dance. Badly. Someone throws flower petals. Someone else throws olives. You're not sure if it's prayer or a party, but everyone seems to believe it's both. By the time the moon reaches its peak, the crowd collapses into laughter and song. Someone offers you a cup of wine and says, "Dionysus forgives all sins as long as you can still dance." You raise your cup, toast the stars, and down it. You may have offended Apollo, but Dionysus? He gets you. And just when you think you've finally found a groove with these gods, someone taps you on the shoulder and hands you a shield. "Military training," they say. Of course it is. It's early morning. Again, you're sore, mildly hungover, and still picking olive petals out of your hair when a man shoves a bronze shield into your arms and points to a dusty field on the city's edge. "Time to train," he says. You laugh. He doesn't. You're officially a hoplite in training now, part of the proud citizen soldier class of Athens. Every able-bodied male is expected to defend the city, no exceptions. Not even confused time travelers with questionable reflexes. Your training ground is more patchy grass than organized arena. Other men are already there, stretching, grunting, sparring, and smacking each other with wooden swords like it's a contact sport with no referees. Which, surprise, it is. You take your place at the end of a line. Someone hands you a helmet. It's bronze, it's heavy, and it smells like old sweat and garlic. It does not fit. You lower it onto your head anyway. It immediately slides sideways, cutting off your vision and any chance of hearing instructions clearly. The trainer, a weathered man with a spear longer than your confidence, paces in front of the group. He shouts things like discipline and formations win wars, and if your shield arm is weak, you die tired. Then he points to you. New one. Step forward. You do. Wobble slightly. He throws a spear at your feet. Pick it up. You obey. It's wooden, thankfully, but still intimidating. You hold it like an umbrella in a windstorm. Now, phalanx. The others instantly form ranks. Shields interlocked, spears angled forward like a hedgehog in battle mode. You scramble to squeeze in. Your shield is too big, your sandals are crooked, and someone's sweaty elbow is in your ribcage. Left foot forward, spears level. Shield on your left. You accidentally poke the guy next to you in the leg. He grunts. It's fine. First day curse. You march in sync, or at least try. The formation surges forward, pushing as one. Dust kicks up. The trainer shouts praise at some, insults at others. You get a try not to drop the spear again. Too late. Eventually you settle into the rhythm. You learn to trust the shield of the man next to you. That's the entire idea of the phalanx, interdependence. Your survival literally depends on everyone else doing their part. It's both comforting and terrifying. Then comes mock combat. You're paired with a boy half your size who still manages to knock your helmet off in 3 seconds flat. The crowd cheers. You take a breather, sipping warm water from a goatskin flask. The taste is questionable, the sweating is not optional. Nearby, a man explains that every citizen must be ready to serve, not just in Athens, but across its empire. One season, you're farming. Barley. The next, you're rowing into battle against Persia. There's no retirement, he adds, only injury or glory. Historians still debate how democratic Athens really was when military service was often mandatory and brutal. You're leaning toward selective freedom with optional bruising. Then the armor lesson begins. You're shown how to wear a linothorax, a kind of chest armor made from layers of linen, glued and pressed together until stiff. It's lightish. It's also scratchy and smells like moldy papyrus. You strap it on along with greaves, shin guards, and a sword belt. Your mobility drops to 0. You're told that in a real battle, you'd carry all this plus your bronze helmet, plus a 6-foot spear, plus a shield the size of a dinner table. It's official. You now weigh more than a small donkey. Next, formation drills. Again, you stomp in rhythm. You pivot. You sweat. You lose track of your left and right at least once. But you're improving. Slowly. Then comes the sling training. You're handed a strip of leather, a pouch, and a smooth stone. Your instructor demonstrates. Swing, release, whack, a bullseye. You try. Your stone hits a tree. Behind you. The trainer winces. Stick with spears. You thank him for the honesty. As the sun climbs higher, you're given a break. Everyone collapses under a tree, panting. Someone plays a flute. Another passes out cold. A veteran named Nicandros tells you about his time at the Battle of Marathon. He smiles as he describes charging barefoot across the plain, spear raised, heart thumping like a war drum. I was 17, never ran so fast in my life. You ask if he was scared. Always. But you run anyway. That's the trick. He shows you a scar on his arm, earned from a Persian blade, then a larger one on his back, from a goat. The goat was worse. The camaraderie is real. These men argue over figs, insult each other's sandals, and occasionally brawl over dice games. But when the phalanx forms, they're one machine. one wall of bronze and sweat. You think about your modern gym membership. Treadmills and protein shakes feel laughable now. Training wraps up with a sacrifice to Ares, god of war. A small fire is lit. Barley is tossed in. A few drops of wine are poured. The trainer mumbles a prayer for strength, focus, and minimal ankle injuries. You're dismissed. As you trudge home, body aching in places you didn't know existed, you catch a glimpse of young boys throwing sticks at a straw dummy. Future soldiers in the making. You wonder how many make it to real battle, how many don't. How many simply vanish into history, remembered only as names on cracked stone. And just as your muscles start seizing up, someone calls your name. You've been invited to Sparta. What? Diplomatic visit? The messenger says. Packlight. You don't even own anything. But sure, let's go to Sparta. Sparta, the messenger says again, as if that word alone shouldn't send a chill down your spine. You try to protest, politely. Something about pulled muscles, diplomatic inexperience, general emotional fragility, but he just shrugs and says, "Don't worry, they're hospitable." Uh-huh. A day later, you're packed into a rickety cart, rumbling down a dusty road toward the south. The countryside rolls by. Olive groves, goats, wild thyme blooming in the sun. But it's hard to enjoy the scenery when you're wondering how many times you'll cry in public over the next 48 hours. By sundown, you arrive. Sparta doesn't look like Athens. No bustling agora, no street performers, no beardy philosophers yelling about ethics. Just stone buildings, wide streets, and silence so sharp it cuts. You're greeted by a man with arms like tree trunks and a scowl that could stop time. "Welcome," he says flatly. "You'll be staying with the trainees." Of course you will. They escort you to a barracks, which is just a long wooden hall, filled with low cots, scratchy blankets, and the overwhelming scent of BO and boiled turnips. The other residents, teenage Spartan boys, glance at you like you're a new chew toy. This is the Agaja, Sparta's legendary military training system, and you for the next 2 days are its most reluctant guest. You try to settle in. Someone offers you dinner. It's a bowl of black broth, a sludge made of pork, vinegar, and blood. You sip it. It tastes like defeat and poor life choices. The boy next to you laughs. First time? You nod, chewing with effort. He says, "Don't worry. You get used to it after a few years." What? Then he adds, "If you live." Sleep is no better. No pillows, no mattress. Just a thin mat and the sounds of snoring, muttering, and one guy doing push-ups in his sleep. At dawn, a horn blasts. You are dragged out of bed and thrown into a whirlwind of physical punishment. Running drills, spear forms, log carrying, river crossing, crawling through dust. You thought Athenian military training was intense. This is war school for toddlers. One boy loses a sandal. The instructor makes him run barefoot over gravel. Another trips and is told to thank the stone for humbling him. You gasp for breath. A boy half your size casually jogs past, doing sword katas while reciting ancestral names. You are not okay. Spartan life is all about austerity, obedience, and total dedication to the state. Children are taken from their families at age 7. They train, live, eat, and suffer together until adulthood. They're encouraged to steal food, but punished if caught. It's not about the theft. It's about stealth. You watch a boy sneak bread from a basket. He slips it into his cloak. The instructor watches, says nothing. Later, another boy gets caught hoarding figs. His punishment? Digging a trench with his hands until sunset. In silence. Historians still argue whether Spartan discipline was exaggerated by Athenian writers to make themselves feel better. You're starting to hope it was. Because if this is toned down, the real thing must have been a horror movie. At midday, you're told to join a lesson. Not math, not poetry, just one subject. Pain. Pain teaches truth, the instructor says. Pain is memory. Pain is loyalty. The boys nod solemnly. One of them casually shows you a scar on his back, from when he was flogged for speaking out of turn. Good lesson, he says. You begin to miss the sponge stick. You ask about arts, music, leisure. They blink. Do you mean hunting? Number. You do not. You realize quickly that Spartan values are the inverse of Athenian ones. Where Athens worships the mind, Sparta worships the body. Where Athens debates, Sparta obeys. Where Athens wears makeup and quotes Homer, Sparta eats dirt and quotes nothing. You witness a Spartan wedding, it's brief. The groom grabs the bride who's had her hair shaved and is wearing a man's cloak. She says nothing. They nod. They're married now. Romantic. You spot a small statue of Artemis Orthia, one of Sparta's main deities. People are bringing her offerings, cheese, wine, twigs. You ask if she's the goddess of love. A boy says no. She's the goddess of surviving the ritual whipping. You stop asking questions. At one point, a boy gets into a fight. No adults intervene. They watch. The stronger one wins. The loser walks off bleeding. You ask what the punishment is. A shrug. He didn't die. Later, you're invited to a common meal called a syssitia. Everyone contributes food. Everyone eats the same, even the elders. A man stands, says a few words about honor, and they all eat in silence. You try to make conversation. No one responds. You try a joke. A boy looks at you like you suggested kissing a Persian. After dinner, a young boy, maybe 11, walks up and says, "You're soft." You nod. "Correct," he adds, "but funny looking." That might save you. You're not sure if that's a threat or friendship. Night falls, you lie on your mat, sore, hungry, spiritually bruised. You think about Athens, its smells, its chaos, its poetry. You miss fishy wine and screaming philosophers. Imagine that. In Sparta, there's no luxury, no softness, but there is unity, strength, purpose. They may lack poetry, but they've built a society where every citizen is a weapon. It's terrifying and oddly impressive. You drift to sleep to the sound of boys practicing knife throws in the dark. You're not staying here. You're catching the first boat out. Because guess what? The sea has its own plans. You don't say goodbye in Sparta. You just leave and hope no one throws a spear at you on the way out. By morning, you're bundled onto a merchant trireme, a long, narrow wooden ship with rows of sweaty men on benches, gripping oars like their lives depend on it. Spoiler, they do. You're finally going island hopping across the Aegean Sea. What sounds like a vacation in modern terms, but in ancient Greece means sunburn, seasickness, suspicious cheese, and near-death maritime drama. The captain yells something unintelligible, and the oarsmen begin rowing in unison. The boat lurches forward. You immediately regret everything. The trireme creaks and groans like it's made of complaints and splinters. You sit near the stern, gripping a coil of rope and trying to look useful. A nearby sailor offers you a chunk of bread so dry it could be used as a building material. You gnaw it anyway, grateful. You've learned not to question edible solids in this century. The sea sparkles. Gulls circle. It's beautiful, for the first hour. Then the wind shifts. Clouds gather like angry gods with nothing better to do. The once clear sky darkens and waves begin to slap the boat like it owes them money. A sailor yells, "Poseidon's test!" Another shouts, "Or maybe we forgot the wine offering again." Someone grabs a goat skull and starts praying. You do the same just in case. You'd laugh, but you're too busy turning green. The boat tips hard. You clutch the railing and make several vows to deities you didn't even know existed. Your lunch, what little of it there was, becomes an offering to the sea. Historians still argue whether ancient Greek ships were technically seaworthy or just highly optimistic floating planks. You now lean toward the latter. The storm passes after what feels like years. The sea calms. You lie flat on the deck like a salted sardine, blinking up at the sun. A sailor nudges you. You didn't scream as much as the last new guy. You smile weakly. Victory. Later that day, you spot land. A small Cycladic island, whitewashed and sun-bleached, dotted with olive trees and curious goats. The boat docks with a crunch and a splash. You stumble off, still swaying. The village is simple. Stone houses, terraces, rope-tied sandals drying on lines. You're welcomed with warm olives, cold water, and the eternal Greek hospitality rule. The stranger is sacred. You learn the island is famous for marble. Not the pretty statue kind, the really fancy pretty statue kind. People here quarry it, carve it, polish it with sand and patience. One man shows you a half-finished statue of a young goddess. She's shy, he jokes. Only has 1 foot so far. You help haul water from a well, awkwardly. A child tries to braid your hair. You let her. Dinner is grilled fish wrapped in fig leaves and chickpeas spiced with herbs grown just outside the village. You've never tasted anything so perfect. You also haven't eaten since Sparta's black sludge, so the bar is low. That night, you sleep on a stone roof under the stars. No sponge stick in sight. Just crickets, salt in your nose, and a goat staring at you from the next rooftop like it knows your secrets. The next few days blur together in a dreamlike haze of sailing, docking, stumbling, sweating, and dodging. Seasick goats on narrow walkways. You hop from island to island like a time-traveling tourist without a budget or dignity. On Delos, you walk among marble ruins, so sacred that no one is allowed to be born or die there. You wonder what happens if someone sneezes too hard. A priest scolds you for stepping too close to a lion statue. You apologize to the lion, just in case. On Naxos, you climb cliffs that overlook the sea, the wind slapping your face like an overly affectionate deity. A man sings a hymn to Dionysus while pressing grapes into wine with his feet. You respectfully decline a sip. On Crete, you hear whispered tales of the old Minoan ruins, of labyrinths and half-human monsters. The Minotaur was real, one man insists. My cousin's cousin saw its horns. You nod politely. You learn that island life is slower, but no less weird. Every island has its own patron god, local superstitions, and completely different rules about when it's okay to sacrifice a chicken. You also learn that travel by sea is a gamble, and ancient Greeks were both terrified of and totally addicted to it. The wind determines everything. A strong tailwind means arrival by dinner. No wind means drifting like a forgotten amphora until the gods feel generous. On your final journey back toward the mainland, you're on a cargo boat full of amphorae. The crew is younger, rowdier, and very superstitious. Someone drops an onion. The captain makes the whole crew say a protective chant and toss a clove of garlic overboard. You follow suit. Midway through the trip, someone spots what they call a ketos, a sea monster. You squint. It's a whale. But you scream anyway. Group bonding. When you finally dock, sunburned, wind-tossed, and vaguely fermented, you kiss the dry land. Literally, the sand gets in your teeth. Worth it. You've crossed islands. You've fought nausea, lightning, and interpretive religious offerings. You're a sailor now, sort of. And just as you stretch your back and think, surely I've earned a nap, you hear the drums. Loud, fast, joyful. You've been invited to a wedding feast. Because rest, in ancient Greece, is just a myth. You've barely wiped the sea salt from your face when someone grabs your arm and says, "You're coming to a wedding." You blink. Whose? They shrug. Does it matter? Apparently not. You're pulled into a crowd heading toward the edge of town, where a large open courtyard is being transformed into a full-blown Athenian wedding feast. Tables are being set. Musicians are tuning up their lyres and flutes. A pig, currently alive and extremely unhappy, is being chased in slow circles by a child holding a ladle. It's already off to a strong start. You're handed a wreath of laurel and shoved toward a group of guests who are laughing, toasting, and arguing about whether marriage is a gift from the gods or a clever form of voluntary exile. The bride, you're told, is 14. The groom is twice her age, give or take. No one seems too concerned by this. It's a transaction as much as a union. Families merging estates, securing heirs, and trying to make sure no one ends up with a cousin by accident. You're seated near the back, among the traveling potters, one-eyed musicians and slightly drunk uncles. In other words, the fun table. Someone hands you a cup of sweet wine diluted with water. You sip. It's less terrible than usual. A good omen. The ceremony itself is brief. The bride is veiled, silent, and escorted by torchlight to the groom's house. She tosses dried figs and nuts to symbolize fertility, and a woman throws a handful of barley at her head, muttering, "May your oven never go cold." Touching. The bride disappears inside. And now, party mode. Dinner is served. If you were expecting elegance, you're in the wrong century. This is feasting ancient style. Wild, loud, messy, and deeply committed to quantity over plating. Plates of roast goat, lentil stew, stuffed grape leaves, and something that may or may not be eel passed down the table. You're handed a bowl of garlicky bean mash, and across from you, a man makes direct eye contact as he tears the leg off a roasted bird with his teeth. Charming. There's music, of course. A trio of flutists are attempting to harmonize while stepping over dancing children. One man plays a lyre while balancing a wine cup on his head. It ends poorly. Then dancing begins. Spontaneous, uncoordinated, joyous. A woman twirls while holding a jug. A man does something that's either a tribute to Dionysus or a personal injury in progress. You're dragged into the circle. Your feet move badly. Someone tosses flower petals. A dog joins in, tail wagging, barking in rhythm. You're unsure if you're winning or being hexed, but either way, the crowd claps. Then come the toasts. One man raises his cup. To the bride, may her womb be strong and her dowry even stronger. Another adds, and to the groom, may he age slower than his sandals. Everyone laughs, drinks, cheers. You're invited to give a toast. You panic. You stand. You say, to marriage, like fish stew, sometimes weird, always filling. A pause. Applause. You sit back down, officially the weird foreigner with good timing. As the night deepens, things get weirder. A group of men begin chanting epithalamia, ancient wedding songs meant to tease, praise, and confuse the newlyweds. They're full of riddles, inside jokes, and references to farming equipment that might be metaphors. You don't ask. Someone passes a plate of cheese soaked in honey. It's the best thing you've eaten in days. Another man carves faces into olives and makes them talk to each other. You are deeply entertained. The older guests begin telling marriage tales, some romantic, some tragic, all completely inappropriate. One woman insists she once wrestled a centaur at her own wedding. No one questions it. A boy performs a shadow puppet play using a torch and his sandals. It ends with Zeus turning into a swan and stealing someone's lunch. Accurate? A philosopher crashes the party and attempts to start a debate about whether marriage limits the soul. He's ignored. He sulks into his grape juice. Somewhere near midnight, the bride reappears briefly to receive gifts. Olive oil, wool blankets, ceramic bowls, and a carved wooden spoon that's apparently a fertility symbol. You choose not to ask for details. You're given a small bag of wedding favors. Nuts, figs, and a tiny terracotta figurine shaped like a duck. No one explains the duck. You love it anyway. Eventually, the feast winds down. People stagger off with full bellies and grape-stained smiles. The flutists fall asleep in a heap. A dog snores under the table. A goat has somehow ended up wearing a laurel wreath and being referred to as Uncle Nikos. You wander outside, stomach full, head foggy, toes sore from dancing. The stars are ridiculous tonight. Clear, wide, endless. You sit on a stone wall watching the embers of the celebration flicker in the courtyard below. For all the strangeness, all the rough edges of this world, its sponge sticks, its oily wrestlers, its political chaos, you feel for a brief moment deeply welcome. The Greeks might not have Wi-Fi or toothbrushes, but they have community. They feast hard, they laugh hard, they yell a lot, but they take care of each other. And now you're going to die. Not literally, probably. But it's time to talk about death and what happens after. Because in ancient Greece, the underworld is waiting. You wake up with honey in your hair, a laurel stuck to your foot, and vague memories of dancing with a goat. Classic. But the laughter of the wedding feast is behind you now. The embers are cold, the guests are gone, and today you're going to die. No, not actually, probably. But if you're living a day in ancient Greece, you'd better learn how this world handles the one thing every mortal shares. Because here, death isn't the end. It's just the start of paperwork. You're led to a quiet grove outside the city where tall cypress trees sway solemnly and the air feels a little too still. It's a funeral, and you've been invited by a gravedigger who thought you looked interested in mortality. Flattering, you arrive to see a body laid out on a stone bier. Eyes closed, mouth covered with a coin. Obol for Karen, the ferryman of the dead. It's your passport across the river Styx. Forget it, and you're stuck haunting the living like a passive-aggressive houseguest. The family wails, loudly, dramatically. It's part of the process. Grief here isn't whispered, it's performed. The women tear their robes, they beat their chests. One woman throws herself to the ground and screams at Hades. A priest sprinkles wine around the corpse. A boy scatters herbs, rosemary, thyme, bits of myrrh. The air smells like a myth in progress. Then, the pyre. The body is moved to a stack of wood. The eldest son lights the flame. No speeches, just fire. You stand in silence as smoke rises into the morning sky, carrying the soul, or so the Greeks hope, toward judgment. Ashes will be collected later and placed in a larnax, a small stone box. It'll be buried or tucked into a family tomb, maybe near a temple. The name might be carved, maybe not. Immortality in this world is for the poets and warriors. The rest fade quietly. As the smoke curls upward, someone beside you mutters, "He forgot to sacrifice to Hermes last week, that's probably why." Oof. After the cremation, there's a feast. Yes, again. Because nothing says closure like roasted goat and watered wine. You sit with the mourners, quietly eating chickpeas while a flute plays in the distance. It's peaceful, unsettlingly so. You ask someone what happens now, to the soul. They shrug. Depends. Because in Greek belief, death is complicated. There's Hades, the god and the place, a shadowy realm under the earth, ruled by strict rules and slightly goth interior design. Everyone goes there eventually. Heroes, peasants, philosophers, equalized by dirt. Unless, of course, you qualify for an upgrade. If you were especially virtuous, you might earn a spot in the Elysian Fields. A peaceful afterlife filled with music, sunlight, and endless leisure. It's like eternal brunch without the line. If you were meh, just a normal, average soul, you wander the asphodel meadows. Not painful, not joyful. Just gray. Forever. If you were bad, say hello to Tartarus. Deep, dark, full of monsters and endless punishment. Picture eternal dental work, but mythologically themed. Historians still debate whether the Greeks believed in this division deeply or just found it poetically useful. Either way, they were obsessed with the afterlife. Not for peace, but for clarity. Knowing your fate meant living with purpose. You wander into a nearby temple of Hades and Persephone, where offerings are left in silence. Black-figured vases, dried flowers. One child leaves a stone carved like a pomegranate. A priestess tells you, he is not cruel, you know. Just fair. He takes all eventually. You believe her. You walk further and stumble across a gravestone etched with an epigram. I was not. I was. I am not. I do not care. Honest. Comforting. in its own way. You begin to see death here not as an end, but as a negotiation, a passage, a paperwork trail. There are ghosts in Greek stories, not malicious, just restless. People leave them cakes and wine to keep them calm. You learn about necromancy, yes, real Greek necromancy, where seekers of wisdom would visit necromantians, sacred places to summon and speak with the dead. It involved chants, sacrifices, and very specific diets. You decide not to try. You also learn that dreams were considered messages from the underworld. So that weird dream you had about a duck and a sponge last night could have been symbolic, or just indigestion. Later, you meet an old man at the edge of town. He's tending to a family tomb, sweeping the stones, placing bread on the altar. You ask him if he fears death. "No," he says, chewing a fig. "I've lived. I've loved. I've paid my taxes. If Hades doesn't want me, that's his mistake." Fair. You sit beside him for a while, watching the sun sink low, casting the marble stones in soft gold. There's no rush here, no dread, just acceptance. When he leaves, he pats your shoulder. Don't forget to live before you forget how to die. You watch him walk away, hunched, steady, vanishing into the dust. And that's when you realize your day in ancient Greece is nearly over. You've feasted, thought, prayed, bled, danced, and wept. You've wrestled strangers, bartered for burnt chickpeas, and accidentally insulted at least 4 gods. And somehow, you're still here. Still standing. Still alive. Mostly. The sun dips below the olive groves. A breeze whispers through the cypresses, and everything at last begins to quiet. The wind softens, brushing gently across your face as you rest beneath the stars. The torchlight from the village fades to flickers in the distance. The sounds of Athens, the laughter, the arguments, the flutes, the goats, all melt into a hush. You lie back, the ground warm beneath you, and let your breath slow. The sky above is the same sky the ancients watched, a canvas of stars they read like poetry, full of gods and heroes and mysteries they never quite solved. You remember the weight of the spear in your hand, the rhythm of sandals in formation, the scent of roasted figs, the whisper of a prayer over wine. And now, nothing presses on you. No more gods to appease, no philosophers to impress. Just the sound of your own breath. In, out. Soft and steady. Let the night carry you now. Let the stones cradle your thoughts. You've walked through an entire world, and still, the earth turns gently beneath you. It's okay to drift now. Let go. Sleep well, traveler. You've earned it.